So, in terms of how this lesson could be improved, we have come up with quite a few different ways that we think would benefit not only the students or the teachers, but the school entirely. So, we can begin with the first one.
Yeah, so initially when we dreamed up this lesson plan, it was in response to an imaginary grade 5 class that became interested in food insecurity because they discovered it was something in their own neighborhood. So we
Yeah.
didn't really come up with a hook for the lesson because we had imagined that the students were already interested and that's what was driving the project.
Hmm.
But I think that in a real life classroom, you would want to have something that really gets students engaged in the project right away. And there's a book called Maddie's Fridge that actually explores food insecurity when a young girl finds out that her best friend and classmate is living in a food insecure household. So it takes them through the process, and her friend doesn't want to tell anyone about it. And then finally, she speaks to her mother about it, and they're able to do something to help that family. So I think that that book is one way that we could bring up the topic in a way that's very clear and engaging with beautiful illustrations for a grade 5 classroom.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely one that is engaging for all classes, right? Like as we mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, this one was specific because the students had asked that question and it was very specific to that class. But when you're talking about general, any kind of grade 5 class, it's really important to kind of get that attention, right? And I think that book really would engage the students. And I think that's a really great way of hooking in the students with that kind of topic, right?
Yeah.
And then if we move on to kind of our second point, we've really kind of realized how kind of big that this lesson might be because it has a lot of different parts. And also with kind of the experience that we have, because this isn't a lesson that we've implemented yet. So we're just kind of basing it off of the experience that we have both virtually and in classes. And we kind of realized timing is not very realistic, right, in this sense. So I think we would definitely kind of break things up a little bit better and make the timings either more throughout more days, and definitely break it down more, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Although it's always good to have more material than you need, just in case it goes faster than you thought it would.
100%.
But I think if we're being realistic, it was probably a little bit overprogrammed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I think. One thing that I've learned, it's always better to have more, right?
Hmm.
But then in this case, it's just being able to realize how much we can do and then progressing from there, right? So it's not like, oh,
Yep.
what do we do next? Well, we've already broken it down to how
Mm,
what would be the next process, right?
definitely.
Yeah, and if we look at our third point here, which is kind of using the assessment as learning output to refine for future lessons,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, so we talked about obviously once we've gone through this once, we'll look at how students react to it and then make adjustments going forward so that we can always just go for continuous improvement. Definitely. Hmm.
Yeah. And then I think this kind of leads to our other point in where kind of we're dealing with emotional content, right? And sometimes with our exit tickets, sometimes the students may be a little worried to kind of ask those hard questions and they don't
Hmm.
necessarily maybe want to be judged. So one thing that we could adjust is we would make these anonymous, right? And I think this would really help the students realize that if they do have a question, they are free of judgment. No one will know
Hmm.
who did it. And sometimes, especially at the younger grades, like grade fives and stuff, sometimes they're very worried about their peers and what they think, right? So I think by making this anonymous, it's really encouraging them to really be honest and truthful, right?
Hmm. And also make sure that they're not just answering with what they think the teacher wants to hear.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
definitely one that we have noticed happens quite a bit in the
Yeah,
class, right? Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So then our last point is looking at how we can take this really critical social justice issue and make it go beyond the walls of that one classroom. Because we think it's something that, because it affects so many children in Canada, it has potential to go across the school, into the neighborhood, maybe collaborate with others, because now we're actually tapping in to a project that can encompass all 6 Cs. We think that would be really cool.